So as William mentioned, they're going to start petering out soon. We're hitting some freezing temperatures soon. Not going to be much up, but probably have a lichen foray here and there. Maybe we can rope Matt into tree identification near the spring or something, and try and get out every now and then. You never know what's out there, and there's always polypores and things of that nature. So, all right, let's get going. There we go. All right, so first one submitted by Stella. These were the only photos she got. It's looking pretty puffbally. It does have some interesting markings here, and I believe this is Scytholysis ericium. It used to be Scytholysis tinctorum, so they you can make dyes out of this one. I told her next time, see if you can like break it in half, and you might see something like this. It has some really cool chambers in it. It's actually really neat looking if you can find one and cut it open. But I think that's what that is. Kind of hard to say with the condition it's in at the moment. Next one here by Stella, if you found this in the neighborhood. We've had this one a couple of times. I'll note this little bit right here. So this is pretty glabrous, smooth cap here. But note that little bit right there. And when we turn it over, you can see, okay, yeah, this is your kind of classic Amanita. This is one that they call yellow patches. Beautiful membranous ring here going on right here. I believe this is Amanita flavoconia. There's a few that are in this group that can kind of look like this. A good example of free gills right there, and these yellow kind of powdery stipe. Not much going on with a vulva sac at the base, but that's because I was pointing out that patch there that was left. A lot of times the rain will wash that off, but that was one of the patches that would have probably been all over the cap there. And that would have been what remained of the universal veil. And it just happened to get washed off probably in some rain. So be aware that that could happen if you're looking for mushrooms. You got to make sure you don't miss something like that. All right, this one's a little washed out, but this is because I zoomed in on this. So Chris found this one. This was actually splayed across a stream. And so this was kind of far away. But when you get closer, I'm sure he had to shimmy over this log to try and get this. But this is your typical lion's mane. There've been quite a few of these up recently. We found a bit on the foray this weekend, and they've had a pretty good year. A lot of times you only see them here and there, but it seems like they've been coming up a good bit recently. So this is Hericium erinaceus, is the lion's mane. Sometimes you'll find these and they have more branches. So there's a couple of different species of these. To me, this is probably one of the easier mushrooms as for a novice to learn to identify, because nothing really looks like this. Grown from wood, this pom-pom shape with its teeth, hard to mistake for anything else. And even if you do mistake it for, say, one of its other species in the same genus, they're all edible. And it's quite tasty too, if you find it in good condition. All right, April found this one. She was out in the Mississippi Delta, but we do find this mushroom here. It's kind of nondescript when you're looking at the top of it, but it does kind of have that matte, velvety look to the top. And when you flip it over, you can see that boletonoid, angular, kind of widely spaced pores. So it is very bolete-like. It's not really a true bolete. This is actually Boletinus marulioides. This is one they changed the name. It used to be Gyrodon marulioides. They call it the ash tree bolete because it's associated with ash trees, but not in the classic sense of being a mycorrhizal to ash trees. It actually has an association with aphids feeding on the roots of the trees. And I wasn't sure exactly what was going on, so I kind of looked it up, and I happened to find this. And not only is it just like absorbing the nutrients from the honeydew of the aphids, they actually grow a sclerotia type nest or, covering around these aphids. So these are the roots of the trees. And so they protect the aphids while those aphids are sitting there munching on the roots, and they're pooping out their honeydew, and the mushroom can absorb that honeydew and use those nutrients. All right, Riley found this out in Prince William Forest Park. A little far from here, but it's a beautiful park if you ever make it out there. This is some folks that have been hunting might recognize this one right away. This is your it's a classic Lactarius look. It's got some zonation in the cap, beautiful blue gills. If she would have cut this, it would have had a blue latex, very distinct. This is Lactarius indigo, and that blue coloration really stands out. One interesting thing I thought in another of our pictures, this feature here, this is called scrobiculate. And so, which that actually just means pits. And so on the stipe there, it kind of has little pits where the tissue is thinner. And so you can see the blue coloration of the flesh under it. And so, but they call that scrobiculate. And quite a few Lactarius will have this feature. So it's something you could look out for, something to think about in the future. Sometimes they're not as distinct because the flesh being blue, it stands out more in this Lactarius indigo. All right, here's a kind of nondescript looking thing that Grace found. And when we take a closer look, you say, oh, okay, well, that's much more classic look, and not to mention a clearer picture. So this is aborted entoloma. And this is the aborted form here on the right. And over here, I believe that might be that same cluster out over here. And so you see these mushrooms growing here. So what's happening with aborted entoloma is when honey mushrooms are growing and this aborted entoloma mushroom is growing near it, it ends up kind of parasitizing and growing over the honey mushrooms as they're trying to grow. So these kind of pin-cushiony, garlic clove looking things were actually honey mushrooms trying to do their thing and sporulate and turn into mushrooms. And these entolomas took over and started sucking the nutrients out of them. Sometimes when they're nice and happy, you'll get the entoloma mushroom growing here. At least I think that's what these are. They sure do look like them. Without having them in hand, it's hard to be certain, but they're growing right alongside. Sometimes you'll even see the honey mushrooms growing in the same area too, and they are all edible. If you do find these, if you smell them, they smell just like the aborted pincushion type forms. All right, so Marilyn found this on an island out in the Chesapeake Bay. Pretty nondescript looking little brown mushroom, but you can see it's growing deeply in a sand dune. You can also see some pine needles here. So flipping it over and looking at those gills, it really stands out. It's got these much thicker gills. They've got that kind of purple lilac color to them. Recently, we had something similar to this growing in our area, Laccaria ochra purpurea. It's can be pretty common. The gills may not be quite as purple as this, but this is actually another Laccaria, except this is one that loves growing in sandy dunes, and it's mycorrhizal with that pine. This is Laccaria trullissata, sand-loving Laccaria. And Marilyn found this other mushroom, which I had no idea what it was. Fortunately, she was talking to some folks and they gave her a name. It's a beautiful big bolete here with this very velvety reddish, dark red base to it. They gave it the name Elysioporus rubriflavus. I looked it up and it looks like that, they called it pretty good. One interesting thing was, so this also has some kind of pseudo reticulation. So it's not really a very well formed web pattern, but it has some reticulation on it, and then the blue staining. But apparently this mushroom smells bad. So Marilyn, if you're on, either chat it, send in the chat or send me an email. Did you smell it? What was this smell? It just said it smells bad. I'm just wondering what bad means. So anyway, so it's probably not edible, especially if it smells bad. Kind of cool that it grows right in the sand dunes down. All right, so this one's submitted by Bill. These were the only two images he sent. And so it's kind of hard to really get an idea of what this is, but I think considering it's pretty cool outside, it has a general look, and it's grown from wood. I think this is Flammulina velutipes, but this is a good example of when you're trying to ID mushrooms, it's always good to try and get all of the features. So if he would have pulled these off and got a nice shot of the stipe like this, maybe that could have been a good confirmation. Oh yeah, that is Flammulina velutipes, because it's got that black velvety foot. All right, this was submitted by April. This kind of just looks like a weird, gnarly purple crust. And there is a purple crust that grows on fallen branches and logs like this. But when you get a shot of what some of the actual fruiting bodies really look like, you say, oh, okay, well, that's Trichaptum biforme. That's the violet tooth polypore. I actually saw on one foray, you can see this is a cut log and it's really happy fruiting from here. And when I saw it, that purple mycelium and knobbly stuff was basically covered the entire face of the log. It was beautiful. So they kind of start as pores, and as the spores mature, it kind of erodes down to teeth. This is probably the most common mushroom. I think we found it on every foray we've ever been on. And there is one that actually grows on conifers too. It's usually a little bit smaller, and usually when you find them, they're starting to dry out and turn white. But I always like finding them when they're nice and purple like that. All right, Sasha found this in her backyard. This is a pretty common mushroom living on some dead wood. When you get a closer look, you can see this kind of dust grow on the caps there. So if you were to take this in the sun and look at it, it kind of glitters. It looks like mica. So these are Mica Caps. This is Coprinellus micaceus. Some people say this is a good edible. I've never tried it because usually when you find it, it's a small amount, and if you cook that, it's going to cook down to nothing. So the gills here, when they first start out, they're going to be kind of white, start turning that pinkish color going to black, kind of similar to like an agaricus mushroom, and it'll eventually deliquesce and turn to kind of inky black. But anyway, they're pretty common, fun to find, and that's your Mica Caps. And that's the last one. And thanks for your submission. Sorry if I missed anybody. Send photos. I know I said I was going to send out an email describing how to take photos and how I'd like them sent, but I will do that, even though it is getting into the winter. There's not going to be much. Maybe during the winter, I'll send a request for some photos you found that you didn't send, and we can kind of have flashback to the more flush mushroom times and kind of look back at some old mushrooms since we're going to be getting lots of polypores soon. Anyway, thanks.